I was in deep grief and figured out who I was beyond that in that moment. And I was in a fog at that moment.
She was supposed to be on a break, done with the grind, done with Hollywood. Kelly Reilly had her bags packed for the English countryside. No more red carpets, no more late-night rewrites, no more studios treating her like a checkbox. She was ready to disappear. And then came Yellowstone, a role she never asked for. A script she doubted she could even pull off. And a character so brutal, so broken, so unhinged, it nearly broke her in return. For almost a decade, Kelly became Beth Dutton. But what no one saw, what happened when the cameras stopped rolling, is the story that truly defines her. The long hours, the emotional collapse, the fight to keep herself sane, the decision Kevin Costner made that changed everything, the whispered feud that tore the show apart, and the private loyalty that bonded them forever. Behind the scenes of TV's biggest modern Western was a woman barely holding it together, a woman with no formal training, no family in the business, just grit, pain, and pure talent. Her journey from a silent British schoolgirl to the fiercest woman on American television didn't happen by luck. It happened through heartbreak, backstage chaos, and one terrifying leap into the unknown. And now Kelly Reilly is finally ready to talk about the career that almost broke her, the cost of becoming Beth, and the one actor who stood by her through it all. Before she ever wore burn prosthetics, before she ever screamed her way into American television history as Beth Dutton, Kelly Reilly was a ghost in the back row of a British classroom. She wasn't raised on movie sets or red carpets. She was born in Chessington, Surrey, on July 18, 1977, into a life that didn't seem destined for fame. Her father was a police officer. Her mother worked as a hospital receptionist. Together they built a household rooted in hard work, rules, and quiet sacrifice. Money was always tight. There were no dance lessons, no private tutors, no posh boarding schools, just small rooms, packed schedules, and modest dreams. And Kelly? She blended into the wallpaper. At Tolworth Girls' School, no one looked twice. She wasn't the class clown. She wasn't the overachiever. She was the girl who sat quietly, took notes, and disappeared when the bell rang. Friends were few. Teachers rarely remembered her name. She didn't shine in science. She wasn't good at math. The only subject that stirred anything in her was drama. And even there, it wasn't about performing. It was about escaping. The drama room wasn't just a class. It was her lifeline. A space where emotions didn't have to be bottled up. A place where the invisible girl could try on someone else's skin and for a few moments be seen. At home, her family didn't know what to make of it. They weren't theater people. Acting to them was a fantasy. But Kelly couldn't ignore the pull. While her classmates plotted university tracks and weekend jobs, she was plotting something far more radical. She wrote letters, dozens of them. Every week, she sent handwritten notes to the casting department of Prime Suspect, the gritty crime drama that dominated British television. She didn't have an agent. She didn't even have a headshot. All she had was nerve, and an unshakable belief that if someone just gave her a chance, she'd prove she belonged. And then one day she got a call. It was 1995. Kelly was just 16 years old, and somehow, through sheer persistence, she landed a role on Prime Suspect 4, Inner Circle. Her character, Polly Henry, was a troubled teenager entangled in a chilling plot, framed for murder by her own mother. It was a brutal part, far darker than the lightweight roles most girls her age auditioned for, but Kelly didn't flinch. She stepped onto the set and found herself face to face with Helen Mirren, one of Britain's most revered actresses, a legend. And yet, Kelly didn't crumble. She listened, she learned, and she delivered. There were no second takes for her nerves. No excuses about being young or new. She was in it, fully, completely, and it showed. The episode aired on May 7, 1995, and suddenly, the invisible girl from Chessington wasn't invisible anymore. She had no formal training, no safety net, just instinct, and the moment the cameras rolled, she proved that instinct was enough. Most actors chasing stardom follow a path paved with tradition. drama schools, diplomas, agents, auditions, but Kelly Reilly never fit that mold. After Prime Suspect, she could have used that momentum to apply to RADA, Lambda, or any of the prestigious acting schools in London. That's what people expected. But not Kelly. She skipped the audition rooms and went straight to the stage. She didn't believe in classrooms with fluorescent lights and stiff monologues. She believed in doing the work. Instead of school, she hustled. She performed in tiny showcases, bare-bones theater nights in the backs of pubs and community halls where the chairs wobbled and the critics never came. But casting directors did. Agents showed up. And slowly the buzz began. Her performances didn't scream for attention, they whispered. She didn't overact. She disappeared into roles, and people leaned in to see more. One of those early fans was Helen Mirren, who worked with Kelly again in 2001 on Last Orders. This time, Kelly played the younger version of Mirren's character, a poetic full-circle moment that proved the teenager from Prime Suspect was now a peer. But Kelly wasn't chasing fame. She wasn't drawn to the spotlight, she was drawn to the mess, the broken characters, the unresolved emotions, the roles that scared people off. In 1996, she took on a deeply challenging part in Bramwell, playing Kathleen Lasso, a young woman drowning in trauma. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't pretty, but it was real. Kelly didn't care about looking good on camera. She cared about truth. By the time she was just 19, Kelly had already conquered something most British actors only dream of, the West End. In 1997, she landed a role in Elton John's Glasses at the Queen's Theatre, a major production that drew attention not just for the playwright, Terry Johnson, but for her. Johnson was so impressed he started creating roles specifically for her. He called her the most natural, deep-in-the-bone actress he'd ever worked with. That kind of praise from a writer of his caliber wasn't handed out lightly. She earned it. And she earned it without ever sitting in a drama classroom. She even tried once, a summer course, just to see what all the fuss was about, but she hated it. The structure, the theory, the critiques, it felt artificial, forced. Kelly learned best on her feet, on stage, under pressure. Her education wasn't found in textbooks or technique. It was found in failure, in risk, in playing parts that demanded blood and bone, not perfect diction. Every step of her rise was built without a map. No degree, no fallback, just instinct and immersion. That's what made her dangerous. She wasn't just acting, she was surviving. By her early 20s, Kelly Reilly wasn't just a rising star. She was redefining what a stage actress could be. In 2001, she walked into the Royal Court Theatre and stepped into a role that would blow the doors off British theatre. The play was Blasted, a brutal, unapologetic story about war, trauma, and the darkest parts of the human soul. Kelly didn't ease into the performance, she exploded into it. She stripped down, physically and emotionally, in front of an audience that didn't know whether to clap or catch their breath. The Times called her theatrical Viagra. It wasn't meant to be a compliment, but it stuck. People couldn't stop talking. She wasn't the sweet girl from television anymore. She was fearless, unflinching, dangerous. Even her mother, after seeing the play, asked her, "Why can't you just do something where you wear a nice dress and be nice?" But Kelly wasn't interested in nice. She was interested in truth, pain, chaos, humanity. That same year, something more subtle but equally powerful happened in Dublin. She worked on the Yalta game with director Reilly. There were no headlines, no controversy, just quiet mastery. For Kelly, that production was her real education. The director didn't just give her blocking or line notes. He forced her to dig into herself, to trust her instincts, to sit in the discomfort of silence and let it say more than words ever could. Later, she'd say there was no way she could have done Miss Julie without the Yalta game. It changed how she approached acting, from the inside out. Then, in 2003, she took on After Miss Julie at the Donmar Warehouse. Another raw, emotionally violent performance that left critics stunned. As Julie, she was desperate, manipulative, tender, and destroyed all at once. She became the youngest actress ever nominated for Best Actress at the Olivier Awards, Britain's highest honor in theater. It wasn't just a nomination, it was a declaration. Kelly Reilly had arrived. And she did it without ever stepping foot in a drama school classroom. While most British actors plotted their path to Hollywood through period dramas and supporting roles in studio blockbusters, Kelly Reilly took a detour straight through France. In 2002, she played Wendy in L'Auberge Espagnole, a small French comedy about students sharing an apartment in Barcelona. It didn't seem like a career-making move, but it was. Her character was warm, confused, heartbreakingly human. French audiences didn't just like her, they embraced her. She became a familiar face in French cinema, returning for 2 sequels, Russian Dolls in 2005 and Chinese Puzzle in 2013. These weren't flashy films. There were no big explosions, no million-dollar trailers. But they mattered. They were intimate stories about love, identity, and how we get lost trying to find ourselves. And in that space, Kelly thrived. Her performance in Russian Dolls won her the Chopard Trophy at Cannes, an award given to rising international stars. For Kelly, that moment was a turning point. She was no longer just a British talent, she was global. But she never let the romance of fame blind her. In 2005, she did something most rising stars avoid. She played Caroline Bingley in Pride and Prejudice, opposite Keira Knightley. It was a supporting role, a villain, the kind of part that gets overlooked. But Kelly didn't care. She made Miss Bingley unforgettable, sharp, elegant, cold as steel. She didn't just play a snob. She played a woman clinging to power in a world where class was slipping away. It wasn't just a character. It was a metaphor. The film made over $120 million worldwide, and millions watched Kelly's poised sneers and ruthless glances. She didn't need lines to dominate a scene. Just a look, just silence. That performance cemented her as one of the best to ever play the role, and critics still point to it as a benchmark. Then came Eden Lake. In 2008, Kelly took the lead in a low-budget horror film that didn't care about jump scares or cliches. It cared about fear, the real kind. She played Jenny, a gentle teacher whose weekend getaway turns into a nightmare. The film was violent, brutal, unrelenting, and the ending? Pure psychological devastation, Kelly warned the director. She told him, "People are going to hate this." But she did it anyway, because for her, comfort was the enemy of truth. Eden Lake won Best Horror at the 2009 Empire Awards. Critics called it one of the most disturbing British horror films ever made. Kelly's transformation from a warm girlfriend to a survivor fighting for her life left audiences speechless, and it left Kelly shaken. The experience was so intense, she stayed away from horror for years. But the performance proved something. She didn't need elaborate sets or award campaigns. She needed a character with something to lose. And maybe that's why she kept taking the hard parts. In 2004, she starred in The Libertine, opposite Johnny Depp. The film was drenched in sex, scandal, and decay. Kelly played Jane, a sex worker navigating a world rotting from the inside. The story didn't flinch, neither did she. It was another role most rising actresses would turn down, too gritty, too risky. But Kelly wasn't afraid of being typecast. She was afraid of being safe. Hollywood took notice. But Kelly didn't chase it. She never played the fame game. She crossed borders not to get rich or be recognized, but to find stories worth telling. And in doing so, she became the rarest kind of actress. One who could walk into any country, any genre, any language and make it feel like home. By the mid-2000s, Kelly Reilly's career was gaining momentum across continents. But behind the magazine covers and standing ovations was a woman quietly unraveling. In 2007, she was engaged to Jonah Lotan, an Israeli actor best known for his work in 24 and Generation Kill. On paper, they were a perfect match. Both intense, private, deeply committed to their craft. They met in New York, and their connection was instant. She followed him across continents, even joining him on location in Namibia while he filmed. She once described him as just heaven. Friends believed she had finally found her person. And then, without warning, it ended. By 2009, the engagement was over. No scandal, no public meltdown. Just a quiet split and one cryptic remark from Kelly: "It was a bit complicated." She never explained more, but those close to her said it shattered her. The woman who had built entire careers on emotional resilience suddenly felt fragile, lost, unsure of everything. Instead of retreating, Kelly did something she'd done since her teenage years. She turned to acting, not just as work, but as therapy. She started choosing roles that mirrored her internal chaos, roles where women cracked under pressure, where love came with a cost, where survival wasn't guaranteed. She said the tough characters helped her toughen up in real life. They gave her armor. They gave her language for things she couldn't explain to anyone else. But even as her work deepened, her personal life remained a maze of distance and exhaustion. In 2010, she met financier Kyle Barr at a wedding in Texas. The connection was fast, sincere, and surprising. But geography became their biggest enemy. She lived near Sussex. He lived in New York. Their first few years were a blur of airports and emotional whiplash. Kelly said she spent more time on airplanes than at home, constantly torn between two lives. One of scripts and sets, the other of long-distance phone calls and loneliness. By 2012, it nearly broke them. Her Hollywood career was taking off. His business was rooted in the US. They were staring down the barrel of a choice: go all in or walk away. And they chose each other. On June 5, 2012, in a quiet countryside ceremony in Somerset, they got married. No press, no spectacle. Just a leap of faith in a world that never stops moving. Kelly later described it as a magical afternoon. But behind that magic was grit. Their relationship had survived pressure that would have destroyed most couples. Even with marriage came no guarantees. Kelly still battled exhaustion from work. She still felt like a woman split between worlds. But during those hard years, one small presence grounded her: a miniature schnauzer. That tiny dog became a symbol of stability in an otherwise chaotic life. The schnauzer traveled with them between New York, London, and eventually Montana. Whether on hikes during filming or curled up in quiet hotel rooms, the dog offered a kind of peace that even the most expensive set couldn't buy. Kelly never advertised these struggles. She never fed tabloids, but you could feel them in her performances: the heartbreak, the displacement, the need to build a home in every character because real life rarely offered one. For her, acting wasn't about escape, it was about survival. In 2014, Kelly Reilly made her boldest leap yet, straight into the heart of American primetime television. After years of complex raw characters on stage and in film, she was cast as the lead in Black Box, an ABC medical drama with an edge. She played Dr. Catherine Black, a brilliant neuroscientist with a secret. She was living with untreated bipolar disorder. The show didn't pull punches. From the very first episode, viewers watched Kelly's character teeter between genius and mania. In one of the show's most shocking scenes, Catherine stood on a rooftop, convinced she could fly. And she nearly did. For some, it was a powerful depiction of a misunderstood illness. But for others, especially those living with bipolar disorder, it felt like a slap in the face. They said the show turned their reality into entertainment. They accused it of glamorizing mental illness, of turning a serious condition into a dramatic gimmick. The backlash was fast and loud. Online forums, advocacy groups, and critics debated whether the show was honest or harmful. Some praised the rawness, others called it reckless. Kelly, caught in the middle, stayed quiet. The show's creator, Amy Holden Jones, revealed that Black Box was inspired by her own father's battle with bipolar disorder. She defended the story's intentions, saying it came from a place of truth. But in television, good intentions aren't always enough. Viewers wanted nuance. What they got, many argued, was melodrama masked as representation. And the numbers reflected that disconnect. Black Box premiered on April 24, 2014, with solid viewership. 6.87 million people tuned in, giving ABC hope that they had a breakout hit. But the optimism didn't last. Ratings dropped week after week. By the season finale, less than half the audience remained. Only 3.72 million watched the final episode. The show had gone from promising to polarizing in just 3 months. Behind the scenes, the fallout was painful. The network had taken a risk with Black Box, even giving it a rare straight-to-series order. It featured big names, including Vanessa Redgrave, and a premise built around taboo-breaking storytelling, but the gamble didn't pay off. On July 24, 2014, just 3 months after it premiered, ABC pulled the plug. 13 episodes and that was it. No closure, no second chance. For Kelly, it was more than a canceled show. It was a reminder of how hard it is to push boundaries in American network television. The role had demanded everything: emotional vulnerability, psychological depth, physical exhaustion, and in return, she got backlash, low ratings, and unfinished storylines. Fans who connected with Catherine Black were left hanging. And Kelly, who had poured herself into the role, was left with a career detour that felt like a dead end. But in truth, Black Box wasn't a failure. It was a warning. A reminder that U.S. television, even in the age of peak television, still struggled with nuance. And for Kelly, it became another scar. Another reminder that the roles worth doing were often the ones least understood. She walked away from Black Box bruised, but not broken. The performance had been bold, honest, unfiltered. And it proved that even when the industry didn't know what to do with her, she wasn't afraid to take risks that might burn. By 2017, Kelly Reilly had been through it all. The emotional wreckage of breakups, the pressure of international roles, the sting of a canceled series. She was exhausted, physically, mentally, artistically. Hollywood had taken its toll. The offers were predictable: strong, sharp, wounded women over and over again. Characters built around rage or elegance, but never both. She felt typecast, drained. She'd had enough. Kelly and her husband were making plans to move to the English countryside, to finally have a quiet life, one not dictated by call sheets and overnight flights. Acting felt more like survival than expression. And she was ready to walk away. And then a script landed in her lap. Yellowstone, a modern Western set in Montana. Ranches, cowboys, family politics, the kind of genre she'd never touched. The kind of story she wasn't even sure she understood. At first glance, it felt like the opposite of everything she wanted. Kelly had no connection to the American West. She wasn't sure she could even fake it. And yet, something about the character caught her eye. Beth Dutton, a woman as fierce as she was broken, a firestorm in designer heels. But Kelly hesitated. Deeply. It wasn't just the role, it was how it was offered. Taylor Sheridan, the show's creator, didn't ask her to audition, he just gave her the part. For an actress who'd spent her whole career proving herself, that kind of blind trust was terrifying. "I didn't even audition," she later admitted. The fear set in fast. She almost said no, almost backed away. But something inside her, call it instinct, call it defiance, said yes. And that yes changed everything. From the moment filming began, Kelly knew Beth wouldn't be easy. She described the character as a beast, and to survive the beast, she had to build boundaries. During that first season, she kept to herself on set. She refused to break character. She scribbled in notebooks constantly, thoughts, emotions, lines from Sheridan, trying to get inside Beth's mind without letting Beth get inside hers. She imagined locking the character in a box when cameras stopped rolling, just to stay sane. Because playing Beth Dutton wasn't like anything she'd ever done. It was physical, emotional, punishing. Sheridan didn't make it easier. He'd call her at midnight just to talk about a scene or a single line. Kelly didn't complain. She absorbed it all, pushed herself harder. After Beth's explosion scene in Season 3, She sat through 3 a.m. makeup calls. She wore 45 individual burn prosthetics, each one carefully painted to look like charred skin. She carried the weight of Beth's pain in her bones. Sometimes, it was so intense, she couldn't even remember filming certain scenes. She'd watch the show later and see herself sobbing, screaming, breaking, and have no memory of doing it. Playing Beth wasn't a performance. It was a transformation, a test of willpower, a full-body possession that Kelly fought to survive every single day on set. She wasn't just portraying a character. She was walking through fire, and somehow, she never got burned. On screen, their dynamic was electric, fiery, tender, and dangerously real. Beth and John Dutton weren't just father and daughter. They were soul-bound by pain, loyalty, and a kind of broken love that few shows dared to explore. But what made those scenes truly unforgettable wasn't just the writing, it was the chemistry. A connection so natural it blurred the lines between fiction and truth. And at the center of it was Kelly Reilly and Kevin Costner, two actors from wildly different worlds, somehow perfectly aligned. Kelly has never been one to gush about co-stars, but when she talks about Costner, her words shift. She's called him the most generous actor she's ever worked with. And that generosity showed from day one. Costner, already a Hollywood legend, didn't dominate scenes. He shared them, he listened, he gave space. He anchored her in the chaos of Beth's rage and allowed her to swing for the fences, knowing he'd be there to catch her if she fell. Their scenes, whether blistering with fury or whispering with heartbreak, were the show's emotional spine. Behind the scenes, the connection ran just as deep. When the cameras cut, Costner didn't vanish into a trailer. He stuck around, he talked, encouraged, checked in. And Kelly, who had spent years on sets feeling like an outsider, finally felt seen. For an actress who had clawed her way up without formal training or industry connections, that kind of respect meant everything. But the true test of their bond came when Yellowstone began to splinter. As tensions flared between Costner and showrunner Taylor Sheridan, most of the cast quietly distanced themselves from the fallout. Rumors flew, scheduling conflicts, creative disagreements, shifting priorities. Costner, focused on directing and funding his passion project Horizon, asked for a shorter shooting schedule. His legal team denied that he made extreme demands, but the damage was done. Sheridan pushed back. Scripts were delayed. Schedules collapsed. And just like that, John Dutton was written out of his own empire. Fans were stunned. The heart of the show was gone. And as everyone scrambled to figure out what had happened, one person never wavered. Kelly. She didn't speak out publicly. She didn't take sides in interviews. But privately, she supported Costner. She understood the risk he was taking. The man had mortgaged his own home to fund Horizon. To her, that wasn't selfish. It was courageous. She kept in touch with him, sent messages of encouragement, made sure he knew someone still believed in him. As the cast fractured and headlines swirled, their bond stayed strong. For Costner, who suddenly found himself isolated and blamed for a show's collapse, that quiet loyalty meant everything. In a series built on betrayal, power, and sacrifice, Kelly and Kevin's real-life relationship became something rare in Hollywood. Genuine, unshaken, built not on ego but on trust. And for Kelly, that trust helped her dive deeper into Beth's darkness, knowing that when the smoke cleared, Costner would still be standing beside her. For years, she gave the performance of a lifetime. She bled for it, lived in its shadow, let it consume her. Beth Dutton wasn't just a role. It was Kelly Reilly's war zone. And yet, when Emmy season came around, time and time again, nothing. No nomination, no mention, just silence. Fans were baffled. Critics were outraged. In an era when television awards had started embracing bold female anti-heroes, how was Beth Dutton, arguably one of the most iconic characters on television, nowhere on the list? Reilly had delivered raw, terrifying, deeply human work. She went toe-to-toe with Kevin Costner, carried entire emotional arcs, and transformed what could have been a one-note rage machine into a layered portrait of trauma, survival, and fierce loyalty. And still, no Emmy. She was nominated for a Critics' Choice Award, an MTV Award. Even fan polls consistently listed her among the best performances on cable television. But the Television Academy? Nothing. Not once during Yellowstone's run did they acknowledge her with even a single nod. Some said it was politics. Yellowstone was never a darling of the Hollywood elite. It didn't come from HBO or Netflix. It wasn't set in New York or LA. It didn't follow the typical prestige formula, no tortured suburban housewives or tortured white-collar men in suits. It was about ranchers, power struggles on horseback, rural America. The kind of stories Hollywood often overlooks or misunderstands. And that outsider status hurt everyone in the cast, but it cut especially deep for Kelly. While others moved on to new projects or gave polished interviews, she had stayed in the trenches. For 5 seasons, she carried Beth through grief, addiction, violence, and rage, then showed viewers the flickers of hope and love buried beneath. It was some of the most emotionally difficult work being done on television, and it was happening in plain sight, but the gatekeepers weren't looking. Reilly never complained. She never tweeted about the snub, never shaded the Emmys in interviews. She stayed silent, as she always had, but her fans didn't. Year after year, when the nominations were announced, her name trended, followed by disbelief. One critic called her snub the single most baffling oversight in modern Emmy history. And maybe that's what hurt most. Not just that she didn't win, but that they didn't even bother to consider her. For Kelly, it wasn't about trophies. She never chased awards. But recognition matters, especially when you've given everything. And for 5 years, Kelly Reilly gave everything to Yellowstone and got nothing in return but the loyalty of viewers who knew the truth. The Emmys missed something historic. When Kevin Costner walked away from Yellowstone, the show didn't just lose its lead, it lost its anchor. For years, the series had been built around John Dutton's quiet authority and Beth's feral loyalty. And now, suddenly, one half of that bond was gone. Scripts were scrambled. Filming schedules collapsed. Taylor Sheridan had to rewrite an ending that was supposed to unfold over 3 seasons, now condensed into one rushed goodbye. Behind the scenes, panic set in. And for the cast, the shift was seismic. Luke Grimes, who played Case Dutton, said reading the final script left him a mess. Kelsey Asbill, emotionally spent, admitted the whole process felt like a slow-motion heartbreak. The set, once full of energy and purpose, now felt hollow. The absence of Costner didn't just leave a gap, it left a void, one that couldn't be filled with dialogue or camera tricks. The patriarch was gone, and everyone felt it. The tension between Sheridan and Costner was no longer a rumor, it was the backdrop of every scene being shot. Some cast members tried to stay neutral, others quietly picked sides. But one person stayed steady: Kelly Reilly. She didn't take interviews to clear the air. She didn't join the speculation. She just showed up, did the work, and carried the weight of the story as it crumbled around her. Beth, once the show's firestarter, was now the emotional center. Without her father on screen, every moment she delivered carried extra pressure. Every scene had to do more, fill more space, land more punches. And Kelly did it, silently, professionally, without complaint. Even as the show raced toward a rushed finale, she held the emotional line. But even she couldn't pretend things were normal. The atmosphere had changed, the camaraderie was strained. What had started as a gritty, passionate story about land, legacy, and blood had become a fractured production held together by deadlines and damage control. What had once felt destined for television immortality now felt like a cautionary tale. Yet, through all of it, Kelly never lost sight of what mattered. Her scenes still hit like lightning, her connection to Beth remained razor-sharp, and her loyalty to Costner never wavered. While others avoided his name, she quietly defended him. She didn't need headlines to prove it. Her support was quiet, but it never faltered. As filming wrapped on the final season, the mood was bittersweet. No redemptive arc, No grand final ride into the sunset, just exhaustion, sadness, and the weight of what could have been. Yellowstone, once the most watched cable series in America, was ending not with a bang, but with the heavy silence of unfinished business. And at the center of that silence stood Kelly Reilly, the last flame of a fire that once burned through every living room in the country. When the cameras finally stopped rolling and the dust settled over Montana's sweeping plains, Kelly Reilly did something she hadn't allowed herself to do in years: exhale. After nearly a decade of embodying Beth Dutton, she was ready to let go. Let go of the anger, the heartbreak, the armor. Beth had given her a career-defining role, but it came at a cost. The emotional weight, the isolation, the feeling of being permanently on edge, even off set. Kelly once said that playing Beth was like jumping into a sports car that could go from 0 to 100 in seconds and holding on for dear life. Now, after 5 brutal seasons, it was time to step out of the vehicle. But walking away wasn't as simple as closing a script. Beth had lived inside her for so long, she wasn't sure who she was without her. For months, Kelly described herself as needing to detox from the role. Beth was still lurking in the corners of her mind, waiting to be summoned. She kept her notebooks from the show, reread old scenes, felt the echoes of a character who had made her famous but nearly swallowed her whole. Still, she knew it was time to rediscover herself, time to act without bleeding. And in 2025, Kelly Reilly began writing the next chapter, with 2 major projects that couldn't be further from the chaos of the Dutton Ranch. First came Under Salt Marsh, a 6-part crime thriller from Sky. Set in a storm-battered Welsh town, the story follows Jackie Ellis, a former detective turned teacher, who's drawn into the mysterious death of an 8-year-old student. It's haunting, quiet, slow-burning. And in it, Kelly trades rage for restraint, violence for sorrow. She's not swinging fists or torching offices, she's unraveling secrets buried in wet earth and small-town silence. It's a return to subtlety, a reminder that she can command attention without fire and fury. The second project is Last Meals, a feature film co-starring Samuel L. Jackson. Kelly plays opposite him in a story about a disgraced chef and a man on death row. Together they explore guilt, regret, and the strange intimacy of endings. It's the kind of film that doesn't chase headlines, it chases humanity. And for Kelly, it's a chance to work with legends in a space that values emotional depth over spectacle. Both roles mark a departure, not just from Yellowstone, but from the industry's idea of Who She Island. After years of being cast as the volatile, damaged woman, she's stepping into stories that require quiet strength, not explosions. Stories where the most powerful moments come from stillness, not screams. And through it all, one thing remains constant: her refusal to chase fame. Kelly Reilly never built her career on headlines. She never cared about red carpets or gossip columns. What she's always cared about is the work, the truth inside the characters, the way storytelling can break you and rebuild you. That's never changed. Even as the world finally begins to see what she's capable of, Beth Dutton made her a star. But it's what Kelly does next that will define her legacy. She started out as a girl no one noticed, invisible in a crowded classroom, overlooked in a town far removed from the glittering lights of fame. No training, no shortcut, no safety net. Just a quiet defiance that said, "Watch me," and the world did. Kelly Reilly didn't storm into Hollywood with noise. She crept in with grit, with characters that bled, with performances that left bruises. She didn't play roles to be loved, she played them to be understood. She never followed the industry's map. She made her own, through sheer will and emotional honesty. From the dusty stage of Blasted to the icy venom of Miss Bingley, from the wreckage of Eden Lake to the controversy of Black Box, from the quiet unraveling of a broken engagement to the unlikely sanctuary of a miniature schnauzer, every step of her story was earned. And then came Beth Dutton, the character that terrified her, consumed her, elevated her, broke her. Beth wasn't just a performance, she was a mirror held up to Kelly's darkest corners. And through her, the world saw what some had always known. Kelly Reilly isn't just talented, she's rare. The kind of actress who doesn't just act, she endures. She survives. She tells the truth, even when it hurts. And now, as the dust settles on Yellowstone and the world wonders what's next, Kelly doesn't owe anyone an answer. She's never chased the spotlight. She's never begged for awards. She's never played the game. She's just kept going. Because for Kelly Reilly, greatness was never about being seen. It was about being real.